Senator Johnson.
Madam President, I would like to offer the A3 amendment.
Secretary will report the A3 amendment.
Senator Johnson moves to amend House File Number 3142 as follows, page 9 after line 25. This is the A3 amendment.
Madam President and members, this is the Home Care and Housing Services Electronic Monitoring Amendment. It's also the Granny Cams bill, or this is the one that you can't be mean to grandma bill. So what we have here now is a much more modified camera bill for assisted living and memory care facilities. The first division is subdivision 1 contains a definition. Subdivision 2 says that the residential care or service provider must allow a resident to install or operate an electronic monitoring device. Subdivision 3 says the provider must not refuse to provide care or services, or in other words, not to retaliate. And Subdivision 4 provides that a resident is responsible for paying the cost installed related to the installation and use of the electronic monitoring device. The facility must make a reasonable attempt to accommodate installation or use, including access to telecommunications or an equipment room. A fee may not be charged for the cost of electricity and so forth. Members, this is really a very simple bill, and I think it's one that there will be many people that will be very happy to have this come across the legislature and it get put into law. Presently, you have to remember that we all have the right to have cameras in our homes, including our vulnerable adults that are living in assisted living centers or memory care. So there is no problem no discussion as to whether someone can put a camera in their home. The main part of this bill is that there would be no retaliation. And I think that most all of us would agree that there shouldn't be retaliation if someone is looking at a person that they love and care for and expected to be cared for, that they would not be being hurt. We had an information hearing in Senator Sharon's committee a couple of weeks ago, and the two testifiers that I brought over were, the first was our Anoka County Attorney Tony Palumbo, who has been very, very active in trying to deal with elder abuse. And County Attorney Palumbo says that most abuse is afflicted by family and staff at the facilities. And he said that if we had cameras and pictures of what was going on, it would make it much more easy to bring a case against the abuser. I think that's something that we should consider very seriously, particularly as we look at our statistics regarding people with Alzheimer's, because those people are really vulnerable because they don't have enough memory to be able to understand what happened to them, or to give them the opportunity to keep it in their mind so they can tell someone about what is happening. This is, I think, a very, very simple bill that I think would be very useful for many, many people, and I would very much like you to support this bill, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Senator Johnson? Senator Han.
Thank you, Madam President. And Senator Johnson, just did this, I assume this amendment at one point was a standalone bill. Did this bill get heard in the Judiciary Committee?
Senator Johnson.
It did, Senator Han, the bill that we brought in this year did not go through the judiciary. But we have removed all of the issues that would have called for it to go to the Judiciary Committee. And I believe Senator Latz would agree with that.
Senator Han.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not on the Judiciary Committee, Senator Johnson, or members, but I have been on the past, and I do know that there are oftentimes many issues that are better, that the body is better served having the Judiciary Committee examine some of these issues. I do have some concerns about the scope of this bill and who it might affect and what the I guess the potential problems that may arise. I can imagine if you had a room where maybe there was more than one person staying and one of them had a camera and the other one didn't, how is that resolved if one person does not want to be on camera and the other one is? Or I just don't know. I'm a little concerned about adopting something that seems to be a fairly substantial change in law without having had it have the opportunity of being fully vetted before a committee of jurisdiction rather than just an informational hearing. So I do agree with you, Senator Johnson. I think that most of us, maybe all of us in this room, certainly are concerned about our elder family members and wanting to do everything we can to protect them. But I'm just not confident that putting this amendment on this bill in this form, in this fashion, is really the right way for us to deal with this issue. It may have more complexity to it than what this amendment facilitates, and we may not, as a body, have a full opportunity to understand all the implications.
Senator Benson.
Thank you, Madam President. And Senator Johnson, you and I have spoken. And in general, caring for the elderly and having the opportunity to monitor what goes on in the rooms of people who might be vulnerable is a good idea. And so fundamentally, I think you're on the right track. The problem is we've never been in a position to amend this language with stakeholders at the table. Some questions on that we would have been able to answer had we had the bill with stakeholder input. Page 2, line 7. What is a reasonable attempt to accommodate? Do they have to have staff standing there monitoring to make sure that if you have access to the establishment's telecommunications or equipment room, what if you need access to that room for an hour and a half because you don't know exactly what you're doing? Do they have to have somebody there to protect the other residents' telecommunications? You mentioned, Senator Johnson, Alzheimer's patients. If somebody is not in a mental state to give consent, can there be a camera in their room? These are questions that need to be answered in a forum where the language can be changed and stakeholders can give adequate input. So, Senator and members, I think this is a good idea, worthy of further investigation, and I certainly think next session as we go forward, it's an important issue as our population ages. But I cannot support this amendment as it's brought to the floor, not because it's not a good idea, but because I don't think the implementation has been fully thought out.
Senator Johnson.
Madam President and Senator Benson, I understand your concern, and I know this is maybe hasn't been vetted as much as we would have liked to have done that. But because really, when I received this edition or found this edition on Alzheimer's policy that was sent to us, a state line Midwest paper, from the Council of State Governments, talking about the number of Alzheimer's patients. And after what County Attorney Palumbo said to us at the informational hearing, that one in 5 people who are in homes with facility services, and if they have Alzheimer's, 1 in 5 of those people will be abused in over age 60. If you aren't dementia or Alzheimer's, whatever you want to call it, 1 in 10 people is abused. If you looked about, I don't know if any of you, if you have received the Hidden Granny Cams article that was in the Minneapolis paper on March 14th. It tells the number of, excuse me here, tell me the number of reports from January, from the year 2015 in Minnesota. 44,603. Total allegations, 51,000. And then they talk about what percent is caregiver neglect is 39% of that. Self-neglect, 19%. Financial exploitation, non-fiduciary, 12%. Emotional and mental abuse, 11%. It's a very serious issue, and keep in mind, Senator Benson, and all of us, that we all have the right to have that camera. So having the camera is not an issue really for the legislature, because it is a given. The wiretap laws that we have allows a person to have a camera in their private residence. And that's what these rooms in assisted living and memory care places are your private residence that you pay, from $3 to $10, maybe even more $1,000 a month. We can put a phone in any room that we want to if the person allows us to do that. But there is such a problem because the family of the person who is in the nursing home, or not nursing home, in the assisted living home or the memory care unit is very concerned that their loved one may be kicked out of that room, saying, we won't let you stay in here if you put in a camera. And of course, they're hidden. Now they're hidden and sometimes not hidden, and they don't have to be hidden. But they would do that because then they're likely to find someone who is being abusive that they might not do it if they knew they were being watched. And of course, we want them to be watched. So members, technology is getting so strong that really, you don't need to be hooked up by wires. You can put these microphones any place, and they can record, and you can get those pictures immediately, almost. And so it's really something that I think we will all want to do time and again. Many of us, even our children, my children, my grandchildren, their babies, when they leave, they want a camera on that baby so that if someone else is caring for that baby, they can see that that child is being taken care of. That's no different than watching out for a vulnerable elderly person. I think it's something that we can do. Certainly it can be maybe become more professional, not professional, that isn't the right word, but just more planned out than what we have right now. But I see no problem in putting forward this bill right now. And if we do have a task force, which the organizations that are helping to care for the elderly people, will be able to still have their task force and improve upon everything and work it out together. But in the meantime, we will allow families to look at cameras and not be afraid that their loved one will be kicked out of the place.
Senator Newman. I'm sorry, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Madam President. And Senator Johnson, thank you for being a champion for the vulnerable, for the elderly. I think we all in this chamber take elder abuse very, very serious, and because it's a serious issue, obviously. I just wish you had brought this bill in front of Senator Sharon's committee just a month earlier, because there was no chance for any testifiers to really nail down the language in the bill and get it right. And I think that's what we're missing here. We didn't have testifiers to say this part is wrong, this part is wrong. And to go ahead and just put it on this bill, load this bill up with a lot of things and not have that dialogue that is so greatly needed on this very important issue that has other rights in this bill too, like the rights of the roommates. It involves the people that are in charge of the power of attorneys for these folks. So I really wish we had had this earlier. And as you mentioned, the work group is going to be getting together. The Minnesota Elder Justice Center has been asked by several stakeholders to convene a work group on this electronic monitoring to bring together multiple perspectives and create best practice legislation for next session. And it's going to have the Minnesota Department of Health, Office of Health Facilities Complaints, provider representatives, such as care providers and Leading Age and Alzheimer's Association. Those are the very people that need to be around this table to make sure that we've crafted very good language. I think it's a very good start, Senator Johnson. I appreciate your efforts, but I cannot support the bill at this, or the amendment at this time.
Senator Newman.
Madam President, I agree with what Senator Rosen just spoke to, and in addition, I would respectfully disagree with Senator Johnson that there are no issues in this bill that the Judiciary Committee does not have jurisdiction over. Specifically, on line 1.13, I do believe the Judiciary Committee has jurisdiction over the individuals or representatives outlined at that point. I would also indicate that all of the different players involved in Subdivision 1, or as described, all have got legal rights that may come into play here. And I think that, as Senator Rosen has pointed out, those players should be at the table and provide us with input. Senator Johnson's idea here is, the underlying idea is very good. And I will remind senators of the horrible situation that occurred down in Albert Lea a couple of years ago, where elderly patients were being abused, and perhaps this would have solved the problem. But to adopt this particular amendment without having it go through any kind of committee vetting is something that I think is we should not adopt. But I do believe that next year this would be something that would absolutely be worthwhile taking a look at, Madam President.
I don't know what it is
Senator Limmer.
for now.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Johnson, I too am in support of this idea in general, but I do have a few questions about the bill. And since I didn't have an opportunity to review this in a committee of any kind, I am a little concerned, and I have to ask you a few questions. And it does involve issues that may or may not be involved with the Judiciary Committee. I wanted to just go over some of the details in the bill, and if I could bring your attention to line 1.25, it actually starts on 2.4. It states the resident may elect whether to install a device in plain view or in a manner where it is partially or fully hidden. And I suppose I have to put it in a context. If you have workers, healthcare assistants that are coming and going in a room, the rooms are small, they're pushing things aside, they're cleaning the room, they're replacing bedding, that type of thing. They know a very small room very well, and they have a lot of access to every little nook and cranny of that room. So when it states here that a camera or a device could be fully hidden, does that require that a modification of the construction of that room be included in hiding a device fully? And I would ask the author to yield to that question.
Senator Johnson, will you yield?
Madam President.
She will yield. Senator Limmer.
Yes, I'm sorry. Madam President and Senator Limmer, you know, I don't think there is nothing that says the facility would have to provide a hiding spot, and then it wouldn't be a very good hiding spot if they knew where it was. So, but also, you know, even if we took that whole line out of there, or the 124 when the sentence starts on the resident may elect whether to install the device in plain view or in a manner where it is partially or fully hidden, from my knowledge, they can do whatever they want in their home.
Madam President.
Senator Limmer.
Madam President, also, Madam President, could I ask Senator Johnson one other question?
Senator Johnson will yield. Senator
And
Limmer.
Thank you, Madam President. I thought this was also not only in their own home, but also in a residential care facility, and that the individual would be in it. So it's not just what they can do in their own home, but in the room that they are paying a service to be taken care of in. And oftentimes, there's a roommate also sharing that same room. Is that correct, Senator Johnson, that it's not just limited to a resident or a patient's personal residence, but it's also a facility-owned room that would be run by a care facility?
Senator Johnson.
Madam President and Senator Limmer, assisted living and memory care units are the home of the people who are renting their room. So that is their home. They have a choice to do what they want. They can say no to any staff to come in. Now, that would be troublesome if they were in need of help, and that would emergencies would be dealt with as they must be. But they really are, these are the home. I'm referring to the home as the place where my brother lived in the memory care unit in the state of Washington. That was his home.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Madam President. Also, the other area that I was concerned about, and you'll have to forgive me, Senator Johnson and members, I have very little experience in this type of area of law, and at least with my elder relatives, they have not needed these facilities. So I'm trying to gain a added context from the discussion. On lines 126, we talk of resident protections and that there can be no recriminations against an individual that would place a camera or any other electronic device in the apartment where this resident would be living. But I don't see any legal consequence if a residency or a facility actually did recriminate against the patient. I see no consequence in this amendment. Is it a criminal one? Is it a civil one? Is there a fine that's imposed by the Department of Health? So I certainly would want not to have a law that did not have teeth in it, and so especially for this vulnerable population. So I'm concerned about that. The other question that I did have is on line 134, and it talks of a care service must not require a resident to install or use an electronic monitoring device without the written consent of the resident. What happens if the resident did not have a power of attorney, was an Alzheimer's patient, comatose, or in any other way incapable of communicating, how would we get the consent of that individual? Senator Johnson.
Senator Johnson.
Madam President and Representative Limmer, regarding the written consent of the resident, if the resident was unable to speak or make decisions for himself, they would generally be have a power of attorney from their family. And keep in mind that these are people that are paying their way. There's someone that's there taking care of paying their bills and so forth. Secondly, to your other question, this would be a complaint that would be registered with the Department of Health. And then that entity would come in and investigate, and they would find out what was really, if it was actual abuse or something that was illegal, or maybe it was just a misunderstanding or it didn't happen even. But so the Department of Health would be the one that you would take it there. And as we're reading in the paper about the many events where elderly people have been and vulnerable people have been abused, they will go to court, file a court case, and get help with that. So, it's really about. I can't imagine that anyone would really want to be concerned about retaliation if a nursing home finds out that there is some staff person that is not acting appropriately. I would certainly believe that the administration would want to handle that and take care of it. And as you said, Senator Limmer, about it isn't just at home that people have cameras, but they are in the homes, in assisted living and in memory care. But I have a good friend who, and since I'm a little older than, I'm older than anyone who sits in this Senate as a senator, I have had a lot of issues with nursing homes because my friends, my family, are using those facilities. And it is very, very difficult. My friend, as I was started to tell you, took care of her husband for almost 10 years in her home. And she had cameras all over that place. So because she had people coming in to take care, people that she didn't know. It wasn't just family, because it's really very difficult for a family to take care of someone that needs 24-hour care. And she told me that she fired a couple of people that were found to be abusive. Saw it on camera. Otherwise, she wouldn't have known.
Senator Limmer.
Madam President, I wish not to belabor this issue. The only problem I have is that some of these very issues that we're talking about are issues that we talk about in the Judiciary Committee every session. We talk of recordings, we talk of public notice, at least for the public notice for a government entity. This would be more on a private-to-private basis, which may or may not require the same requirements that we have when government is involved. We talk of consequences in the event that one of the parties would recriminate against someone who put up a camera. We have those type of provisions elsewhere in law, but it's missing here. The other concern that I do have is in many cases when an individual is using or renting a room in one of these facilities, there often is a roommate to share the expense and the space. We haven't addressed the privacy rights of that other individual if that person was filmed at the same time. And does that person deserve some modicum of privacy or not? Does that person require a written consent? We don't know. So these are the reasons why I'm uncomfortable with working on this particular bill in this fashion. Having said that, I greatly appreciate the work and the focus that Senator Johnson has made on this issue. This is an issue that sooner or later every one of us may have to address. And it's important that we get it right. I would hate to have a court case involving a bad actor get thrown out of a courtroom because we didn't cover something in law. That would be a travesty in another direction, and justice would not be served. So, and the one thing that I do know is Senator Johnson has passion. She has passion for the care of the elderly, and that's one thing that I always appreciate on the Senate floor, and we oftentimes don't have enough of. But I want to thank you, Senator Johnson, for presenting this bill. But due to some of the gaps that I talked about, I just feel a little uncomfortable with the provision right now.
I do have a list. Senator Goodwin, Senator Abler, Senator Latz, Senator Ingebrigtsen. Senator Goodwin.
Thank you, Madam President. And I don't like to talk about personal issues normally or things that, or tell some individual stories, but this, every time an issue like this comes up, I need to tell this story even though it makes me angry and sad. My favorite aunt lived in Milwaukee, and I used to go there quite often, and she was like another mother to me. And she was in an assisted living place where everybody had their own rooms. It was a beautiful home in suburban Milwaukee. And she was there for several years and really loved it. And then somebody came on staff that was beating her and raping her. And my cousin, who was the closest to her, would ask her how come she was changing so much. She didn't have Alzheimer's. She had really bad case of rheumatoid arthritis and couldn't live on her own anymore. And she would deny anything was wrong. She would say nothing happened. And they couldn't see the bruises and stuff because they were in places where people couldn't see them. And this went on for months, and finally he managed to get her moved to Princeton, Wisconsin, in another nursing home. And when they did their physical, in a nursing home this time because she was so ill, and when they did their physical examination on her, they said they'd never seen anything like it and how badly bruised she was. And then within 2 weeks, she died. And the coroner said that he'd never seen anybody so messed up inside as she was, and how bruised she was. My cousin and I went to the funeral home to make the arrangements for her. And the funeral director said he'd never seen anything like it. She could not, he couldn't believe how bad she was, and he had the report from the coroner. That man should have been tried for murder, but he never was. We called the Department of Social Services. The assisted living home was closed down for a year. I suppose the man that was doing it was fired, and nothing else ever happened. They didn't sue or anything, but that's the kind of things that can happen in some of these places. And then I've got a constituent in my district who has a son that was in an assisted living. No, not assisted living, excuse me. He was in a group home for disabled, and he had a lot of special needs, and he could get aggressive occasionally. And this happened about 3 years ago, and she's been asking me to do something like this, and I haven't, and I apologize for that. But I do support this because he was beaten so badly that he died from his injuries, and it was her 23-year-old son. I'm just saying that we do have a responsibility to people. And they're not going to tell a lot of times because they're afraid of retaliation. And I don't think this is a dangerous amendment, and I really hope that you can think about supporting it, and maybe it'll save somebody. Thank you.
Senator Abler. Senator Bonif, you're on the list.
Thank you, Madam President. I didn't realize the debate would go this long, and I wasn't even going to talk about it. But then, especially Senator Goodwin's comments, just make you want to it makes you understand why this sort of thing would come forward. And before I forget, I just want to. Oh, he left. But Senator Limmer didn't want to belabor the discussion. I'm kind of new here. I wonder what belaboring the discussion would look like, Madam President. But anyway, I want people to understand what this amendment does and what it doesn't do. This is like almost nothing. It just says you can already do what you're allowed to do, and they can't recriminate against you for doing what you already get to do. The questions about data privacy, unanswered. Currently, you can put a camera in somebody's room and there's a roommate. You can do it. The data, where does it go? Who knows? It goes to where it goes now. There is no regulation about data or the person's other privacy or anything. This bill doesn't answer the questions. It doesn't create the questions. Those questions already exist. It just says, if you live at an assisted living place, not a nursing home, at an assisted living place, when you put the camera in, they can't stop serving you. And that's what the amendment says. And it says, but if you need a little bit of help, they have to offer reasonable help. But that's all it says. And members, this is a small step. But I think if it could stop some of the events that Senator Goodwin talked about and some of those stories that we know so much about, this is a start. I know the industry gets concerned about a lot of these changes that come upon them. This is not a big deal. The beginning of when we had Alzheimer's housing, I had the first law from Attorney General Hatch. It said, if you say you do something, you have to do it. That was a big groundbreaking thing, and that was controversial. Now we have much more strict standards. This is a beginning. It's a good start. It's an important amendment, and I urge members to vote yes. Thank you.
Senator Latz, are you ready, or should I go to someone else? Senator Latz.
Madam President and members, there's been some conversation here about the Judiciary Committee jurisdiction and whether some of the issues would fall within our committee's purview. And I've been giving some thought to that and talking with counsel about that as well. There's only one aspect of this that I think maybe would be judiciary related, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But I can tell you what I think is not related to judiciary. The original bill had some criminal penalties in it. You may recall an amendment from Senator Johnson, I don't know, a week or two ago to a bill. It was ruled not germane at the time, but the content of that amendment included criminal penalties, and they have been removed from this amendment here. So those certainly would have had Judiciary Committee implications. The retaliation provisions apply to prohibit only retaliation against the resident. Doesn't apply to other employees or implicate any Human Rights Act related matters. And if they did, those Human Rights Act implications would stand on their own independent of this, so there wouldn't be any jurisdiction, I don't think, there. There are actually consequences if the provisions here were violated. The consequences would be for the licensing or other regulatory body that's related to the facility that's providing the services or the organizations that's providing the services, whether it be a home care provider or the housing with services establishment. But those issues would not be within the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee in any case. And this would not be government-created data or government data itself. So there's no Data Practices Act issues that would be implicated here. The only thing I'm not 100% sure about would be how HIPAA might apply here. In the event that a camera caught a healthcare provider providing services, that one I'm not 100% sure about, but those HIPAA issues would not be within the Judiciary Committee's jurisdiction if any such issues exist. And the issue relating to legal representative or the definition of legal representative, I don't really see that as a privacy issue in the broader sense. The legal representative would have the legal standing that they have because they stand in the shoes of the resident for all legal matters, including the ability to waive any rights to privacy that might otherwise, the resident, him or herself, might otherwise have been able to assert. So the only issue that I see that might raise some privacy issues that might come within the judiciary's jurisdiction would be if there were a roommate or another person that shared the location where a camera was installed. And even then, I'm not sure exactly how the Judiciary Committee's jurisdiction would apply there, but clearly that's been a theme in the discussion here, concern about the privacy of a roommate. Now, as I understand it, this amendment does not apply to nursing homes, where it's quite common to have shared rooms. And it does apply to private homes, where there might be more than one person living in the private home, but it is still the private home. And for most assisted living facilities, I'm informed, are individual private units, but there may be some circumstances in which some assisted living facilities have roommates. So to allay those concerns, I've had an amendment prepared that would address the issue, and so I would like to introduce the A51 amendment.
Secretary will report the A51 amendment.
Senator Latz moves to amend the Johnson Amendment to House File Number 3142 as follows, page 1, line 24, and this is the A51 amendment.
Senator Latz.
Thank you, Madam President and members. And I did share this amendment with Senator Johnson before offering it here. The amendment would apply to page 1, line 24. So in the operative language, it deals with the monitoring being permitted. And if you look on line 24, after the word resident, it would insert in which the resident does not share a home, room, or unit with another resident who does not consent to the installation or use of an electronic monitoring device. In other words, either there is no roommate, or if there is a roommate, that roommate would also have to consent to the use or installation of the electronic monitoring device. And if that roommate did not consent, then this provision requiring the allowance of that device would not apply. So hopefully this would address the concerns that people have raised about privacy of a roommate in this situation.
Discussion on the A51 amendment. Senator Benson.
Thank you, Madam President. And Senator Latz, with all due respect, I think your amendment is just evidence that this bill needs to go through some hearings. Your amendment talks about the ability to give consent. What if the person has dementia? At what point do they lose their ability to consent? We don't even have the opportunity to discuss if somebody who has power of attorney for a person who's not able to give consent can give consent in their stead in this case. I appreciate Senator Latz and Senator Johnson that you want to move this issue forward. It doesn't mean it's a bad issue if we just say, you know what, we haven't had time to do this right. So, Senator Latz, I'm going to oppose your amendment. I'm going to ask people to oppose the amendment, not because these aren't good discussions, but it's appropriate to have them in a committee where stakeholders can come forward, where legislators can talk openly to one another in the presence of people who are going to be impacted, instead of having notes sent in from the outside saying this is a good idea or this is a bad idea. This is not the best way to do something that is this important, so I would ask you to please vote no on this amendment.
Is there any more discussion on the A51 amendment? Senator Latz.
Madam President, I would just suggest respectfully that the definition of legal representative or power of attorney, which is a legal representative, those are definitions which have existed longstanding in Minnesota law. And I don't think we would need to have a legislative hearing to look at redefining those situations when people have dementia. If someone has dementia and they don't have a power of attorney already assigned or some other legal representative already established, then they retain their rights until such time as they do get assigned a legal representative of a different nature. So maybe they would choose not to give consent, and then that would be the end of the story. But often when someone is at that point of dementia, decisions are being made for them as to their health care and all sorts of other issues as well. So I don't think we would need to have a legislative hearing to consider redefining the scope of those legal representatives.
Is there any more discussion on the A51 amendment? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Now we're back to the original amendment, the A3 amendment, and I had Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you also, Senator Johnson, for bringing this forward. Members, let me give you a little different twist on cameras and recording people. And the world that I referred to that I come from, where there was wrongdoing or there was suspicious of wrongdoing, really no different than what Senator Johnson's trying to do here. And I applaud her efforts to bring this forward, where there may become some abuse that is going on, whether it be in a assisted living, a nursing home, or a memory care unit. If that is going on, we should be all in this room, and I think we are concerned about that after hearing all the discussion. Members, when there's a suspicion of wrongdoing, certainly we have to go through the legalities and evidentiary areas of law to be able to put cameras above. But let me tell you a couple of instances where we know and suspect there was wrongdoing, where cameras were hidden and where we actually were successful in detecting crime, really no different than what we're talking about here. And that was where you have pull tabs. The state of Minnesota would come out where you have pull tab abuse going on. We would actually be able to set cameras right above the person and watch them actually take money out of the door and put it in their pocket. Or let's go to drug dealings, where we would have an undercover agent actually buying drugs, where we would actually set a camera in the room looking right at the same place all the time, where this person would bring the person in front of the camera. They would exchange the dollars back and forth, and you again now would have a case against somebody that was doing something wrong. That is breaking the law. Really no different than what Senator Johnson's talking about, somewhat different. But my question, if Senator would yield for a question.
She will yield. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam President. And Senator, do you know if the resident unit, the owner of the resident unit, let's just go to a memory care unit, somebody who owns that suspects that one or two of the employees may be doing some type of abuse or some theft of a resident, would they now, under current law, have the ability to put that camera, unknown to the employees, in the room where they suspect that the abuse is going on?
Senator Johnson.
I'm sorry, Madam President and Senator Newman, I do not know the answer to that question. But I do believe that they have cameras in hallways and doorways and so forth like that, so that I know that staff people are being put on camera as they walk through different places. They do it for safety for the resident, usually.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam President. And real quickly, thank you for that. I don't know if anybody else in the room happens to know whether that's a possibility. Those that have worked on Health and Human Services issues that cover the licensing and the practicing of our health care for the elderly facilities in the state of Minnesota. If not, I'm suspecting that if there is a reasonable expectation, or reasonable suspicion that they would be able to do such a thing, to be able to record that and use that as a means of, if nothing else, terminating the employee or protecting obviously the elder from any type of physical abuse. So I don't know if anybody knows that answer. If they don't, if they do, fine. If not, thank you, Senator Johnson, for bringing this forward. I think it's something that we have to all pay attention to here in the near future, and I appreciate it.
Senator Bonoff.
Thank you, Madam President. I, too, rise in support of this amendment. I thank Senator Goodwin for sharing her very moving story about her family. And it reminded me of my constituent, Sheila Van Pelt. Many of you in the chamber have come to know Sheila over the years, as she has shared her story with us about her mother and the loss of her mother. And so after 3 years of working on this, we finally, thanks to the work of the Senator Sharon's committee and thanks to the work of our legislative auditor, who put forward an audit about the practices with regard to investigating actually our nursing homes, so not exactly like what's before us here, but and it was the HMO in particular, care facilities. And so we in this Senator Sharon's overall bill, we included many of the recommendations that the Office of Legislative Auditor made in order to give families stronger ability to investigate when there is wrongdoing and really to make sure that people are held accountable when things happen. And so this amendment is related to that. I do support it. I am rising to tell members about this because I understand that the other body is not certain they do want to adopt the provisions that we work so hard to put in our bill. And so I speak out in hopes that some are listening, and if those who have influence in this process can renew their strong support to enact these meaningful reforms. I think it would be a shame to end the legislative session without taking action on some at least preventative action to make sure that tragedies that have happened are prevented in the future.
Senator Sharon.
I think I'll just make this brief because we've been circling this quite a while, but I just wanted to respond to Senator Ingebretson that it is clear that the language in the amendment offered by Senator Johnson limits the ability of a residential care or service provider to require a resident to install the use of an electronic monitoring device. So at least as it relates to the space that the resident is renting, the space that's described as theirs to organize in the way that they choose to, the facility cannot require an action in that space without the consent of the resident.
Is there any more discussion? Senator Latz.
Madam President, members, as some of you know, I wasn't sure, actually I was uncomfortable with the bill this morning, or with the amendment this morning when I first learned it was coming forward today. And I've given it a lot of thought, and as you can tell from the analysis when I presented the A51 amendment, I've kind of worked through some of the concerns I had. And I know this discussion will continue after today, regardless of what happens here on the floor with this vote. But with the adoption of the A51 amendment, I'm comfortable with adding Senator Johnson's proposed amendment to the bill, and I'm going to be voting for it.
Is there any more discussion on the A3 amendment? Senator Johnson.
Madam President and members, there's just one thing that I'd like to talk about a little bit, and Senator Limmer, it was when you were talking, and others have said it also, about getting it right. And you know, I wonder which bill would be perfect that we passed during this session and during the many years that we've all been here. This is a beginning. It can be improved, there's no doubt. I have no doubt it can be improved. But it has to start somewhere. And I think, and I'm very happy to find out or hear that there is going to be some discussion or a task force put together by the stakeholders that are involved. And I think that's a very good idea. And I think if we can pass this into law now, that would allow that task force to see some of what they're talking about and maybe improve it. Look to see what's missing, look to see what we shouldn't have on. Maybe we should embellish it in some way or another. So let's not think of this as something has to be right, especially when I think about the next year, at least a year before we'd get something that would help to have people would be more comfortable putting cameras in their loved ones' rooms if they knew that they wouldn't be retaliated. Let me tell you, I have my brother who died on March 23rd in a nursing home. I have a brother in a nursing home, and you know, he doesn't. He's worried that they won't treat him very well if he complains. And that's what and he doesn't have dementia or Alzheimer's. He's, doesn't have the memory he used to have, but he certainly knows what's going on, and he doesn't. He's afraid of that. I know that. I see that. I'm almost surprised that some of you haven't had the experiences that I've had, because there are so many people that are in nursing homes that they are related to friends and neighbors of mine and so forth, so we're talking about it. But anyway, let's just not worry about it having been perfect today, but maybe tomorrow.
Any more discussion on the A3 amendment? All those in favor of the A3 amendment as amended, say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted.